Hello and welcome along to the latest episode of the Samuel Luckhurst show from the Manchester Evening News. I am today's host, George Smith, and as you can see, I am joined by our Chief United writer, Mr. Samuel Luckhurst. Samuel, good to see you back with us. How are things? Are you well?
I'm well, thank you. Yes, I'm engrossed by the cricket. I can imagine we've got quite a few Indian listeners on this because United have a huge Indian fan base as well. But I think I always thought Arsenal were the most tribal set of sports fans online until certainly this series, noticing that the presence of Indian cricket fans and what a religion it is out there. I always had an inkling of it, but it seems to be intensifying at the moment, given the run chase they're on and the developing scenes at Lords. It's difficult to avert my eyes from what's going on at Lords at the moment. But when everyone's listening to this, they'll know the results. So congratulations in advance to India or England, depending on how it goes this afternoon.
We will certainly see what happens. But before we talk about the football, we must offer a shout out to our podcast sponsor, Saily, which is a brand owned by NordVPN. It is a new eSIM service app that you can use abroad if you're in desperate need of an internet connection. You can download Saily in your app store and use code Manchester at checkout to get a 15% off your first purchase. For more information, please go to our description box. With that said, Samuel will now talk about the football and the world of Manchester United. And I think it's fair to say not an awful lot has happened. Certainly on the transfer front in the last few weeks, it's been a lot slower than we anticipated. But before we talk about transfers and things like that, we'll react to the breaking news essentially in the last half an hour or so, where Darren Fletcher has been installed as the club's lead under-18s coach. Seems a very logical move, Samuel. He's replaced Adam Lawrence, who oversaw a period of success, but it feels like a natural switch for Darren Fletcher, somebody who knows the club inside out and should help these youngsters raise their game to the next level.
Yeah, well, he came through the academy. Fortunately, they've got rid of KL Rahul in the cricket, so that's why I was just distracted there. Dreadful timing, but back to the football. He's come through the academy. He's been a conduit between the academy and the first team, where say there's a training session that the first team need a specific player because there's an injury to a senior player, or international commitments have left them with fewer players. The guy that Eric Ten Hag certainly was going to and Ruben Amorim goes to is Darren Fletcher, because his knowledge of the academy is it's so unique, it's so specific. Of course, he's got his two sons in the academy, which of course is always going to have an influence on his understanding of that. But this was happening before Jack Fletcher and Tyler Fletcher defected from City to United a couple of years ago. He was doing this. So I remember Nick Cox telling me several years ago, when he was always a bit baffled when you'd see a youngster for the first time in training, and of course, as writers, we're excited because it's something new to write about. There's there's a bit of a story there. If they're just photographed training with the first team for the first time, and of course, fans online get excited about it. It's this youngster coming to prominence, possibly. But he always said it was pretty much just it's ad hoc. It's just depending on who's available, and it's also servicing the needs of the first team. And Fletcher's had 3 or 4 different roles at United now. I think he rejoined the club at the start of 2021 as a first team coach. A couple of months later, he became the technical director. Then was it at the start of Ten Hag's reign, he became a first team coach. He stayed there for a few years, survived the Ten Hag departure last summer, and now he's taken on this role as the under-18 coach, which I think he's well suited to, not just because he's dealt with the academy so recently, but his enthusiasm for it. He goes to the youth games. He goes to Leeds Sports Village. He's actually someone who wants to go to Leeds Sports Village on a cold midweek evening, which doesn't appeal to many, but it's something that's part of his job, and he fully embraces it. And I think from a selfish perspective, a journalistic perspective, it does make the academy a little bit more interesting. I mean, with my commitments to the first team, it's difficult to keep on top of that, which is why Steven's taken has been carefully following them over the last 18 months or so, which is good for him. It's good for the MEN. The MEN has got to be dedicated in its academy coverage, and I think we are. We were at the Emirates. We were at Villa Park for those 2 Youth Cup ties last season. There are only so many games you can attend because of when they're playing at Carrington on a Saturday morning. It's not exactly the ideal working conditions. You can't work there really. But Fletcher is likable. He's approachable. He's articulate. And he's really, as I said, he's really enthusiastic about youth football. He is someone who, if he was to see you at an open training session, he would actually stop, shake your hand, and have a chat for a little bit, because that's the way he's always operated. And I've spoken to him a number of times, and he's as affable and likable as he appears in interviews. I was always struck when he was a player how articulate he was and what a good talker he was in some high pressure circumstances at the time. I remember him doing a post match chat with MUTV back when MUTV were a lot more invested in their match day coverage after United had just lost at Chelsea at Stamford Bridge towards the end of the 2007-08 season. Both teams going for the title. It got a little bit heated. It was that day when there was a fracas between Patrice Evra and the Chelsea groundsman. This is how far we're going back. And Fletcher was very, very. I really vividly remember his interview afterwards. He was so measured and constructive with how he dealt with the line of questioning. And again, the line of questioning was not as soft back then from MUTV, where they had they had Stuart Gardner overseeing match day operations at the ground, pretty much with the commentary and the pre-match and post-match chats. And Fletcher at that age would have been about, I think he'd have been 25. He wasn't a youngster, but that season he was not playing a lot of football, and he got that opportunity to play in that game because United had Barcelona coming up in the midweek. So he knew he was not going to play against Barcelona, but he was playing in an extremely important Premier League game. I think it was maybe the second to last game of the season. I think United had 2 more league games after that when they were going for the title with Chelsea. And him being him, he applied himself very well. And in that summer, I think he wondered, maybe I'm going to have to leave here. But Ferguson said, I want to keep you. You'll get your opportunities. And then the next 2 years, with Owen Hargreaves pretty much out of the picture because of his tendinitis, Fletcher was one of the most important players at United. He was, in terms of his big game now, so he was terrific. So I think he ticks a lot of boxes here in that. They've got another one out as well, by the way. Jofra Archer's just taken a wicket, looking very good for England. Just going back to Fletcher again, it's that balancing act of he's come through the academy. He's dealt with a huge career setback when he was suffering from ulcerative colitis. So he's been out of the game for a long time. We know how important it is for young players if they've suffered a bad injury or they've got a bad issue where they can't play football for a long time. Having a sounding board, someone who's been through that, I think is vital. And Fletcher is one of the best to look up to or to speak to because he's a brilliant talker. He's been through it. He recovered from it as well, and he went on to have a pretty good career. He played for United again. He went on to West Brom, did pretty well there. He went on to Stoke City as well. So after that, a period in his career where really his career was in jeopardy because it's such a debilitating and nasty illness, he went on to play Premier League football for Man United, for West Brom and Stoke and Scotland again as well, of course, at international level. So he's someone who, certainly when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was making all these old boys appointments when he was manager, and the majority of them I kind of took a dim view of. The one which I thought was a completely logical move was Fletcher because of his outlook on the game, the way he speaks, the way he conducts himself as a player. I'm sure there's imagery that probably proves otherwise, but to me, he always struck me as one of those players who always wore black boots as a footballer. Now, maybe there's proof out there that he took a walk on the wild side and wore brightly coloured boots. But if he literally wore black boots throughout the entirety of his career, I would not be surprised because that is his character. And of course, United have this policy in their academy. The academy players, whilst they're in the academy, they wear black boots, which is something I'm completely on board with. So it's good for us. It's good for United. You know, it will certainly he will be someone I'd very much like to interview formally next season. And I think knowing him a little bit, or speaking to him a few times, and knowing his character, I'm sure he would be pretty amenable to that.
Certainly ticks a lot of boxes, doesn't it? Without a doubt, for all the reasons you've reeled off there, Samuel. So moving on to first team matters, where things don't feel quite as positive and upbeat, and it feels strange saying that we've had no football, but transfer activity has slowed, Samuel. Brian Mbeumo obviously has been the big talking point now for more than a month. We caught wind of the situation about 3 weeks ago where we felt a deal was close. It looked as though it was on the cusp of happening. Been no such luck, unfortunately. Only a week and a bit to go now until the US tour. What is the latest with Brian Mbeumo, Samuel, from your understanding?
I've literally got nothing to add to that. To my little contribution just before I went on leave. I've been slightly taken aback by the lack of developments. It did amuse me. Obviously I think I've semi-zoned out whilst I've been off, but occasionally you have a little look, and on Sky's rolling transfer live blog, they had Mbeumo's name in it for ages and ages and ages, and you'd go in there and you'd scroll for a little bit, and I thought, I know what they're up to here. Like, there's literally nothing on Mbeumo, and it's got to the point where over the last week, I think even they've omitted Mbeumo's name from the headline, because it's been about Gyökeres or Madueke, or who else has been on the move, somebody else, but it's been extremely eerily quiet with Mbeumo. And it's obviously a big week for United, because they leave, we're speaking on the Monday, they fly to Chicago next Tuesday, so that's 8 days away. They've really got to be aiming to get him on the plane for that, because you want more than just one signing in the squad that finished 15th and trophyless last season. They need another new face in that squad, and we're talking about two players who are forwards, one a winger, one a playmaker. Not even got onto the striker yet, and I'm not surprised this is developing, because the Delap situation, where of course he chose Chelsea, that has thrown a spanner in the works. Even though I don't feel as though he was right for United, I get it that he's gone to Chelsea and he's won some competition that is only going to be remembered for the president of the United States borderline gate crash in the celebrations. That's how little people think of this tournament. But he was not what United need, and I'd have rather have seen Gyökeres there. But there's a bright red flag with Gyökeres, which is that, do you want to go down the route of signing a player who worked for the manager in a weaker league where there was a lot of fodder to go at? That's a red flag there. But of course, come that first weekend of the season, when Ruben Amorim is down his haunches in the technical area, and he looks up and he sees Gyökeres, and Gyökeres has got a cannon stitched to his shirt rather than a devil, I'm sure Amorim is going to rue that development this summer. But Gyökeres is a player who probably felt that he should be playing in the Champions League for the coming season, given what he did in it last season, scoring 4 goals against Manchester City alone for Sporting. And it's completely fair and logical that he would want to go to a Champions League club. And if I was in his position, I'd be looking to go to Arsenal over Manchester United as well. And it looks like that's what's going to transpire. And all of a sudden, these strikers, and look, somebody quite senior at United a couple of months ago was saying, look, I think they literally said, like, how many strikers out there are there? Essentially, strikers who fit their profile and what they want. And we are running out. The lad who at Eintracht Frankfurt, who is not particularly, I sound like Sir Alex Ferguson there, like the lad at Frankfurt whose name I can't pronounce or I've forgotten, but is a France international. He's not that young. He's older than Rasmus Højlund, but it seems like he's bound for Newcastle United. And if Newcastle United are going to invest big in a striker, does that mean Alexander Isak is going to leave? Quite possibly. But there's no way that Isak is ending up at United. If he ends up at United, brilliant. I'd be delighted for them. I'd be delighted as well, because it'd be great to watch him play for United. But I'm not expecting that whatsoever. Alexander Isak is the moon to United, it feels like, given this this season where they've got no European football to offer whatsoever. And Newcastle have got Champions League football to offer, and it would take a huge fee to prize him from them. And United were looking to sign a striker at the start of the transfer window for £30 million in Delap. So it's not. I'm not surprised that things are developing the way they are. I'm not surprised that the Mbeumo deal didn't get done in June. I always thought July was likely. If they get that done in July now, that looks like a result because we're midway through the month. And it did feel like that, it would be pretty much done and dusted 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think Keith Andrews' appointment there has thrown a spanner in the works, which has happened before when there's a managerial vacuum at a club and there are transfer negotiations going on. The prospective buying club can try and take advantage. As soon as a manager comes in, it can throw a spanner in the works, and that they can dig their heels in and think, well, no, I'm not leaving this player go until they pay X amount. And with the Mbeumo fee, it is getting to a point where United maybe need to, I'm not saying don't go for him whatsoever, because I think he'd be an absolutely ideal signing for them. He's exactly what they need. I said this quite some time ago, but there does come a point where you have to just think, right, walk away, move on to someone else. But he is very much a prime target for the position they want to fill the team. And let's face it, in the contingency list, if they were to move on from Mbeumo, there is not a comparable player who has got his Premier League pedigree and scored anywhere near as many goals as he did last season, who would really suit that role. I mean, just thinking of someone off the top of my head, Kudus, but of course he's gone to Tottenham. Jared Bowen, but can you really see United going for Jared Bowen? Probably not. So they've got to ensure that Brentford don't take the mickey out of them, and that they're not going to hold out for a stupid fee from Mbeumo, because this is someone who wants to leave and has got a limited time on his contract, and this is the summer to cash in. But yeah, United, Barada said on the record pretty much, the club can't be taken for a ride over transfer negotiations like they used to be. So it is a fine, it is a delicate balancing act, and you've got a lot of noise online from fans, quite impatient, desperate for a new signing after Cunha came in so early on. But there's still work to be done there. I hope for United's sake and for my sake as well, given that I'm flying out to Chicago next week, that Mbeumo will be heading off to the United States. That said, Andre Onana did miss the squad departure plane for New York a couple of years ago, but then joined United out there. So there's always the possibility that could happen as well, given that it's roughly a 2-week tour.
Yeah, of course. But obviously, ideally, we'd all like to get the signings on that plane going as a collective unit, Samuel. And like you said there, they are having to balance the act this summer. It is a very fine line that are having to tread between not overspending, but at the same time getting players through the door that certainly suit Ruben Amorim's system. But there's so many moving parts in all of this, Samuel. Obviously, player sales are paramount this summer. We know how important they are. Obviously, again, there's not been much progress on that front, which has enabled funds to be freed up to be used on new incomings. Do you think almost though the Mbeumo situation is delaying United in terms of other deals? We've both said that we felt a striker would be probably one of the last players to come in. But it just feels like they're hitting a bit of a lull at the minute. But obviously outgoings are really important, and nothing's happened on that front either.
They've obviously got to have the guarantee that cash is going to come in for some of these players, because you cannot have a squad where you've got a bloated attack with 7 or 8 players on 6-figure weekly salaries, even if, say, some of them go out on loan and the cost is covered in the majority by the club that have taken them on loan. You can't have that from a business perspective, and never mind a club that is struggling, or say they are struggling, to comply with the profitability and sustainability rules ahead of a season where they don't have the income of European football. And from a footballing sporting perspective, they do not have that European football to offer the players. So they do not need as big a squad. I think the squad at the moment on the website, if you were to be looking at the profiles in the first team section, if you're sensible about it, because I think they've got Dan Gore as one of the first team squad members, which, let's face it, he's not. He's got to go out on loan or get a permanent move in the summer. Unfortunately for him, given the way the past 18 months have transpired for him on loan at Port Vale and Rotherham. But it's a 26-man squad, I think. And of course, you've got those 4 forwards on there who just don't count because they're not training with the first team. Some of them have been back for individual sessions. Some of them have not gone back. Some of them will never go back to Carrington and won't be missed because of their own individual circumstances. But there has got to be that guarantee that United will get funds from player sales. And if it's not going to be one of these players who want to leave, I still find it hard to believe that of these 5 players that United have outright confirmed, which we all knew, Malacia, Sancho, Rashford, Antony, Garnacho, I find it hard to believe they will not get a fee for any of them. I think because of Garnacho's cachet, they should get a fee, and they'll just have to play a bit of bartering. There'll have to be a bit of bartering there to ensure they get a good fee for a player who they've hot-housed over 5 years in their academy and their first team. Rashford is a tricky one. I could see that being a loan. Sancho, they need to get some money for him because his contract's up next year, and they sure as hell will not be triggering the 1-year extension in it. Antony has created a market for himself. United have got to be getting a fee for him, even if it's this season coming, it's a loan deal, but you have a fixed fee to pay, and there's not a loophole like Chelsea had with Sancho. Tyrone Marshall, they did not pay a lot of money for when they bought him 3 years ago. They do not require a big fee to get him off the books and avoid a loss under PSR either. It's something like £4 million, I think. So it shouldn't be that difficult, but there is a waiting game to be played here because potential buying clubs will have their own valuation of the player. United will say, well, no, look, this is what we value him at. And also we have PSR. I think that's where PSR comes in quite handy because it does dictate how much a club can command for a player. Now, Antony is worth under PSR, and for United to avoid a loss, I think they need around about £32.5 million. So there's no point United going to a potential buying club and saying, we'd like £40 million for him, because the buying club will say, well, look at your calculations. Look at the calculations. You only need that much to avoid a loss on him. And United will say, well, yes, but look what he did for Real Betis last season. And then the other club will say, well, yes, but there's a reason why he went to Real Betis and was playing in the Conference League. It's because he's not good enough for Manchester United, and because you don't want him either. So there's always going to be that back and forth, and that will go on for a long, long time. The days where United could get all their business done in June, in May, I mean, you go back to 2007, which is still by and far and away the best summer transfer window they have ever had. They had a position of strength there because they were champions, because they had finished in the Champions League. They reached the Champions League semi-finals, and they'd reached the FA Cup final. And Ferguson was so bruised from the shellacking they got from AC Milan in the Champions League semi-final second leg. He thought, right, we need a bigger squad, a better squad for next season if we're going to win the Champions League. And he had his contacts in Portugal, so that's why Anderson done, Nani done. Owen Hargreaves, they tried to sign the previous year, kept open the line of dialogue, got that done because I think he might have had a year left in his Bayern Munich contract. The only one that was protracted was Carlos Tevez' loan deal because of the complexities of his ownership with Kia Joorabchian. And that still got done before the start of the Premier League season. But now, United are not coming at it from a position of strength, and there have not been many summers in recent years where that's been the case. And okay, there have been times where they have got deals done quite early on, or they've spent big for players, but the context is always very different. There's always mitigation behind that as well. There's no point going through it summer by summer, but there's a reason why Cunha got done so early, which is that he had a release clause. Delap had a release clause as well. We know that did heavily influence their interests in those two players. And Mbeumo does not have a release clause. Whoever this striker that they could sign out there, there's no release clause. And the longer United wait to sign a striker or go without signing a striker, you will get every Tom, Dick and Harry being linked with them. whether they're a free agent or whether they're attached to a club, whether they're a busted flush or whether they're actually a decent striker. Because everyone knows Manchester United want a striker, and United cannot pull the wool over fans' eyes and try and say, well, Cunha's played up front, and Mbeumo's got experience of playing as a striker if they sign him. Rasmus has shown glimpses of his potential in the past. Josh has done well this calendar year. The Delap approach made it abundantly clear they want an out-and-out number 9, so they cannot get by with as good players as they are, and they will absolutely enhance that attack, Cunha and Mbeumo. But as far as I'm concerned, those two guys in a starting 11, you have Cunha as one of the two playmakers. You have Mbeumo on the wing. You could have him as one of the two playmakers as well. You should not have either of them at the tip of the arrow. It has got to be a fresh face. Manchester United had a minus goal difference in 23-24. It was 10 times worse last season. They have got to sign a striker. But it is getting to that point where you're starting to worry, where are they going to get to a situation where they think anyone will do? Because you look at the market and you look at the options they have or don't have, and really, as that senior figure said a couple of months ago, like, how many strikers are there out there? There are not that many, but it's no excuse for United because they've had enough warnings, and they've dropped the ball with a couple of names in recent years as well.
That's the thing, isn't it? The leading names that have been linked with United to fill this number 9 spot have either already been snapped up or on the brink of being snapped up. Liam Delap, as you mentioned there, Samuel, signed by Chelsea. Victor Gyökeres going to Arsenal, it seems. Victor Osimhen looks like he's going to go back to Galatasaray. They've been the three that have sort of been the leading lights to fill this number 9 spot. But I remember you wrote a piece a few weeks ago where you almost said that it's not unusual for United to sort of secure the main piece in the jigsaw very late on in the window, like they did with Manuel Ugarte last year. So it seems possible that could happen. But to put you on the spot a little bit, Samuel, if Bryan Mbeumo does complete a move to United within the next week and makes that plane to the US next week, would you consider Cunha and Mbeumo being part of the tour squad, the only two sort of statement signings? Would you consider those as ultimately that being a successful start to the window at this point? Or do you think United, obviously a lot of caveats with sales, but would it be a good start that they would have had if they get Mbeumo over the line in time for the tour?
Yes, because there is enough time to get that striker in, and I completely get the argument and the preference to get a striker in for pre-season so that he can learn the ropes, adapt. In fairness, when they signed Højlund 2 years ago, he didn't come in for pre-season. He was paraded on the Old Trafford pitch for their only home friendly, and this was someone who had never played in England before, and on his debut at Arsenal, he looked very, very accomplished. He put himself about, and he clearly unnerved Gabriel and William Saliba. And he had a pretty good start to his United career, scoring at Bayern Munich, a couple of very good goals against Galatasaray. Obviously, he had to wait a long time to get off to break his duck in the Premier League. But in the Champions League, he showed really good potential. The Copenhagen game as well. And he did get a goal on his first Premier League start against Brighton, but unfortunately for him, Marcus Rashford just took it a little bit too far, and it went over the goal line, and it was retrospectively disallowed, and it was a bit of a sliding doors moment. But Højlund, who was pretty hopeless last season, even he at the start of his United career, someone who had come from Italy, had played in Austria, played in Denmark, not exactly ideal background to come into the Premier League. He came into the Premier League and he looked pretty decent, and he didn't struggle for chances either. He was missing a lot of chances before he got that Boxing Day goal against Aston Villa in the Premier League, but he was getting decent opportunities in Premier League games before then. I'm sure a lot of people can remember them. Manchester City, the 1-on-1. There were a fair few at Sheffield United as well a week earlier, and you could go on. So if they've got Cunha and Mbeumo, two of the best players in the Premier League last season, how many weeks would it be before the Premier League season begins? About 4 weeks or so, I think, wasn't it? Just under 4 weeks. That's pretty good going, I think. If they've just got Cunha going into the tour, then at that point you start to think, well, yeah, this is insufficient progress, and really nobody cares for the excuses. Like, okay, you've got all these players in the departures lounge waiting to go, but you did put Rashford on a bloated contract when it was. I know it was a difficult situation, but he had his best season of his career, was in the midst of negotiations for a new contract. You did sign Jadon Sancho, you did sign Anthony. Garnacho is someone that I think United are dealing with that quite sensibly. You can't legislate for every player being marooned at the club, but they have been they've been their own worst enemy really with a lot of these contracts they've doled out, whether it's to existing players or signing players.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. At the other end of the pitch, Samuel, Andre Onana getting injured last week in training. We will miss the US tour with a hamstring injury. Excuse me. You reported, I think, back in January that United wanted a goalkeeper this summer to essentially compete and challenge with Onana for the number one spot, which almost felt as though Altay Bayindir is going to be the man that makes way and be sold this summer. All of a sudden, though, he looks like being the starting goalkeeper for the tour. Do you think this could change United's plans in terms of hurrying up the recruitment of a goalkeeper this summer?
There has been a lot of noise around Onana, but I think it's always been a case of less is more. United were not budgeting for a number one goalkeeper signing this summer. Their priorities lie elsewhere, as everyone's seen with the deal for Cunha, the approach from Mbeumo, the attempt to sign Delap as well. They desperately need a midfielder. We've not even discussed that, but yeah, I'm sure they could make the argument that they could get by in a season without European football, without a new midfielder, as long as none of those midfielders leave. But there's not a lot. There's not enough. There's inadequate quality there, I would say, or specialist quality. I think you're banking a lot on Bruno Fernandes having another very, very good season from start to finish as a central midfielder, which he's well capable of. And you also probably having to instruct Ruben Amorim, or having that conversation at the very least, that Kobbie Mainoo is regarded as a central midfielder for at least for the upcoming season as well, and see how you get on there. But with Onana, I've not been all over this story where I've been off, but you can't have Altay Bayindir as the starting goalkeeper for next season. But if you're signing a goalkeeper, you can't have Onana, Bayindir, Tom Heat, and a newbie on your books. And looking at the training imagery last week, there were a couple of decent reminders that United have got some good academy goalkeepers there. And I'm not for a minute saying that Eli Harrison should be getting a look in this season. He should be going out on loan and having a good, fulfilling season on loan in League Two or National League even. Dean Henderson, took the plunge and went on loan to Stockport County. That was his first experience of men's football, and it's not done him any harm whatsoever. Radik Vitek has shown, I think, some really good potential in the opportunities he's got, particularly in that friendly against I can't remember the opponents in Norway last year, but he played very, very well, and I've liked the look of him at youth level. But like Mate Kovar, get good money for him. That's the way he's got to be seen, unless you've really got the full intention of making him a goalkeeper part of the first team squad, unless you genuinely believe he can be an upgrade on Bayindir, which maybe there's an argument there that is the case. Whether United are of that opinion, I think I'd be doubtful of that. But if a goalkeeper is coming in, a goalkeeper has to go out, and logically that would be Bayindir, because you're not going to sell an injured goalkeeper in Onana. And Onana's fee, again, going back to the PSR calculation, they would need the best part of £30 million for a goalkeeper whose value was not helped by Nemanja Matic's comments before that Europa League tie in Lyon. And let's face it, his value has also not been helped by the clangers he's dropped in his 2 seasons at United. He is a hard sell at that price. We all know what he's capable of, Nana, but I think as some of us have said before, the goalkeeper feels like it's a position you can kick that can down the road. I know I'm sure everyone's seen this Emiliano Martinez stuff. I sincerely hope for United there's nothing particularly concrete in that, because he's just not as good a goalkeeper as he thinks, or Aston Villa fans think he is, or Argentina fans think he is. He has dined off that very good save in. I mean, you can't complain when you make a save like that in a World Cup final, and then you go and win the World Cup in a penalty shootout. You're going to get your plaudits. But that was nearly 3 years ago, and I just think he's got a real clanger in him. I mean, Villa bottled it, didn't they, at Old Trafford on the final day of the season? And the biggest bottler of them all was Emiliano Martinez. And if he was such a great goalkeeper, which he's not, he wouldn't be playing for Aston Villa. So I know in recent years that there is demonstrable evidence that he is a better goalkeeper than Andre Onana, but I would not take him over Onana. I really wouldn't. And I don't think I'd be disappointed if United were of that viewpoint that he would represent an upgrade. I think they've got to sort their house out, get their house in order. Elsewhere, mainly up front, and if you get Mbeumo in as well, then the next position or the area that really needs to be addressed is midfield. As far as I'm concerned, I think they need a midfield. I think they need the midfield bolstering as well.
Yeah, and that's going to be a really interesting objective to try and achieve. I think not really been any concrete links with any midfielders yet either. It's been quite quiet on that front. But just to wrap up, Simon, before we finish, pre-season is obviously training's underway. The first friendlies this weekend against Leeds United in Sweden. Then it's off to the US next week. Are there any players in this first team squad that you look at ahead of this pre-season campaign that you think it's a real make or break period for them ahead of the competitive action starting next month?
Probably not, which sounds strange for there not to be any jeopardy regarding certain players. But I think the majority of those players who are training at the moment, who are involved in the first team sessions, the majority of them will be in that squad when the transfer window closes. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's the reality of it. I mean, a friend sent me a picture of Luke Shaw last week and said, look how trim he looks for pre-season. But Luke Shaw's been, this is the 12th pre-season Luke Shaw is reported for at Manchester United, and that's maybe 5 or 6 pre-seasons too many. You go back 7 years to when Jose Mourinho was in favour of selling him, and I don't think Mourinho was wrong on that. And Luke Shaw has outstayed his welcome, but nobody's going to be parting with cash to sign someone with his injury record who has got 2 years left in his contract and is on about 200 grand a week. So, make or break for Luke Shaw, that is probably a phrase he's been bracketed with before, but there's no jeopardy there really. It's strange to say that about a squad that factually was United's worst in 51 years, and there've only been a handful of players who've been released or retired, and really didn't have prominent roles in the squad either last season. But there has been some decent squad management going on there, in that Aidan Heaven's been signed and looks a really good player. Maguire had his contract extended. De Ligt was, I thought, in pretty good form when he got injured against Nottingham Forest, unfortunately for him. Lisandro Martinez, when he's fit, is an asset. Nusa Mazraoui came in last summer and has done very well. Diogo Dalot is a player who does, he does offend quite a few fans. I've got friends who are fans and really cannot stand him, but we look at it through a different prism. Someone who speaks 4 or 5 different languages, is one of the senior players in the squad, is almost always fit, is a good personality, is a good lad. You can see why he got the Players' Player of the Year award a couple of years ago, and also he's got a new squad number, and he's one of the players that Ruben Amorim leans on, which isn't a surprise. You go on to the midfielders. Is Mason Mount going to leave this summer? No. He shouldn't be at Manchester United still, but he could become a good signing by accident because the manager loves him, and the manager plays a system that he's well versed in. Is a club going to pay £15 million for Casemiro? Probably not. Could he be redundant at United this season with no European football? Most likely, but they are saddled with him for at least one more year. He will not be a Manchester United player this time next year. I think it's safe to say. And it's just the forwards. And those 4 forwards aren't training with the first team. And we're just waiting for them to get off the books. Maybe there could be some movement with Højlund, but if United are struggling to sign a striker, Højlund isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And clubs are not daft. They're not going to come in and say, here's £35 million for Rasmus Højlund, who scored 3 Premier League goals or whatever it was last season. That's cloud cuckoo land. So again, and this happens a hell of a lot with United, players they want to sign, players that could go. I think a lot of those developments will happen towards the end of the transfer window, which is still 7 weeks away, that deadline day. So that's really cheered my mood.
It can only get better, Samuel. It can only get better. But hopefully we will be able to hopefully pick up the pace a little bit. But at least we've got some actual football coming at the weekend and then next week. So that's one saving grace. But that does mark the end of this episode of the Samuel Luckhurst Show. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, make sure to leave a like and perhaps a comment as well. Myself and Samuel will be back again later in the week, where hopefully we'll be able to update you on some transfer news. Hopefully something will happen between now and then. But we'll be back on Friday. So have a great week and we'll catch you again soon. Take care.